Hey, want to go outside for a bit? We've been cramped up in here all year, it feels like. My wife looked up from her phone. She had been browsing Reddit, and I saw her eyes were bleary and confused.
Huh?
You know, outside? That place we used to go to that's not here?
Oh, right.
She looked back down at her phone. Come on, I'm seriously so bored. Let's go tobogganing or... Oh, let's build a snowman.
What are you, 10 years old or something?
She looked up at me, smiling now. Yes, I am a child in a man's body. You know this. Now, can we please get out of here and do something?
I'm not feeling up to it. You go ahead.
I sighed, and was about to resign myself to staying indoors, but then decided against it. What the hell, I figured. I'll go out by myself and make a snowman, just like I did when I was a kid. So I went out to the front lawn and did just that. I began by making a snowball, then rolled it around in the packing snow and watched as it got larger. I pushed it towards the center of the yard, rounded off the rough edges, and set to work on the next big snowball that would be the midsection. By the time I finished that one, I was nearly out of snow. We hadn't gotten much yet, and it had been depleted quickly. I looked around and saw there wasn't enough to make a head for my snowman. We had a very small yard. The houses were packed tightly together, and space was at a premium in this neighborhood. Glancing across the street, I saw my neighbor still had plenty of snow. The old man who lived there, Mr. Verdun, was a tall, thin, severe-looking man with black hair that never seemed to gray despite his advanced age. He liked to dress in all-black clothing, and drove a giant vintage Mercedes, also black. He had a reputation in the neighborhood as well, and since we had only moved in recently, I had barely heard the gist of it. I hoped he wouldn't notice me stealing a bit of his snow. He hated people coming onto his property, had signs everywhere saying, no trespassing, no solicitors, and no visitors, even. Wow, what an old grouch, I thought, telling myself I really shouldn't. But I did. I walked across the street and hesitantly stepped onto his lawn. For a second, it felt like sirens were about to go off. Police were going to pull up with lights flashing to arrest me. That's how scary this guy was to me. To all of us. The whole neighborhood was terrified of him due to multiple incidents over the years. But then nothing happened. I felt a bit foolish standing there on his snow-covered lawn looking scared. He was fine. He was just a grumpy old man. The rumors about him were just that. Rumors. Kneeling down, I started to make a new snowball. This would be the head of my masterpiece. I made it smooth and perfectly spherical. Holding it in my hands, the big basketball-sized snowball felt heavy and just right. Part of me desperately wanted to throw it at a car. Mr. Verdun's car, specifically. He had run over my cat with the giant gas guzzler barely 6 weeks before, and never even offered an apology. I was about to turn around and walk back across the street when I saw Mr. Verdun watching me from his front door. The old goat had crept out silently and had been glaring at me from his doorway. He was standing there with his arms crossed and a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Oh, hey, Mr. Verdun. Sorry, this probably sounds dumb, but I was making a snowman and...
You ran out of snow?
He seemed amused by my discomfort, basking in it. Right. I caught myself shuffling back and forth on my feet like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar before dinner. Do you mind? The whole situation was exceedingly awkward. The man hated people coming onto his property. Loathed it. What had I been thinking? To my surprise, though, he just looked at me, baring his teeth. He didn't appear happy when he smiled. It was a hateful grin.
Wait there.
I worried for a moment he was going to get his camera or something for proof to press charges, but the whole idea seemed ridiculous. Still, I took a step back and stood on the street, glancing again at the no trespassing sign I had brazenly ignored.
Ah, here we are,
he said as he came out of his house with a black hat in hand. I saw he was wearing his long winter coat and a pair of boots, of course all jet black. He surprised me by walking out of the house and straight up to me. The hat in his hand was weathered and faded, starting to turn gray almost. It had a smell also, like week-old roadkill.
Frosty needs a hat,
He said. His voice was cold as the snow in my hands, which was turning them number by the second. He reached out to me.
May I?
He took the big snowball as if to examine it, and casually handed me the black fedora he was holding. I felt a surge of revulsion the second I touched the thing. I wanted to get it away from me as quickly as possible. Mr. Verdun granted my wish, and offered the blank snowman head for me to place it on top of. He grinned again at me, and this time I could see all of his yellow teeth, ranging in color from a nicotine-stained yellow-brown to almost black in places.
Have fun.
He chuckled and turned to go back inside, easing the big wooden door slowly closed. His eye watched me from the crack of the door, staring at me until the space disappeared and it was completely shut. The whole thing was highly disturbing. Suddenly, the big snowball in my hand seemed to tip over of its own volition. I caught it at the last second, stopping it from falling onto the road. The blank-faced snowman head stared up at me, the fedora resting on top. Without knowing why, I felt a momentary sickness and despair, an utter unpleasantness, as if I was holding a severed head in my hands instead of a big snowball. I tried to shake off that feeling, and walked back across the street to my own yard, looking back over my shoulder as I did. Mr. Verdun was still watching me from his front window. Unsettled, I quickly placed the head of my new snowman atop its body and stood back to look at it. Not complete, a voice in my mind said. It needed something. Several things, actually. I went inside and fetched a few items from the house. A carrot for the nose, classic. A piece of red licorice for the mouth, and a couple marbles for eyes nearly completed the effect. But no, it still needed more. I found a couple hefty branches that had fallen from the tree during the last storm, and stuck them into the torso on either side. Perfect, I thought. I stood back again to look and saw that the illusion was complete. The glassy reflections of the marble eyes looked almost human. The bright red licorice mouth gave a slightly more unsettling smile than I had anticipated. But the hat was the kicker. I didn't like it, but it certainly completed the look of him. I looked over my shoulder again. But Mr. Verdun was gone, no longer watching me. Sufficiently cold and feeling unsettled for reasons I couldn't explain, I decided to go back inside.
Have fun making your snowman?
Christine asked from the kitchen where she had started to make dinner. Ooh, what are we having? I asked, ignoring the question. The fact was the entire thing had turned sour once Mr. Verdun had decided to get involved.
Pasta with mushrooms. We needed to use up the ones from the bottom of the fridge. They were starting to go bad.
Nice, my favorite. Slightly expired mushroom pasta.
Hey, if it tastes disgusting, we'll go get nuggets or something. But we can't keep wasting food.
I know, it's true. That night after dinner, which actually tasted pretty good, my wife was looking out the front window.
Why did you make it facing the house?
What?
The snowman. It's like it's looking at us in here. Why'd you do that? Shouldn't it be looking at the street?
I approached the window and looked out through the glare and reflections shining back at me from the lights inside the house. I squinted to see the snowman I had made was looking right back at me, his marble eyes looking very human in the dull light of the moon. How? I stood there trying to make sense of it.
What? Why are you looking at it like that?
For whatever reason, I can't explain, I kept it to myself. I figured it was just kids playing a prank, but what kind of a prank was that? No reason. It's nothing. I lied. I saw snow falling in the glow of the streetlights and noticed it beginning to accumulate on the lawn. Later that night, while I slept, I had a terrible nightmare. I was standing in front of a giant wall made of ice. My reflection looked back at me in it like a mirror, only bluer. The feeling I had was one of anxiety, as if someone was going to sneak up behind me and grab my shoulder at any second. But there was no one behind me in the vast reflective surface of the ice wall in my dream. Or so I thought. A tree branch suddenly popped out from one side. then one on the other. As if by magic, the snowman I had made rose up behind me, materializing from thin air. He loomed large over me and wrapped his tree branch arms around me in an embrace, his red licorice mouth opening up to reveal a maw that stretched wider and wider as I watched. The twig ends of the tree branch arms began to grow and stretch across my skin, like ivy on a building. They began to poke into my skin, and I felt them puncture and go inside, reaching for my heart and wrapping themselves around it. My breathing sped up, and my heartbeat quickened with fear as the branches continued to cover my body, going into my mouth and encapsulating my face. Once I was covered in the hateful growth, the snowman stepped forward, and the freezing cold of him began to envelop me. In my dream, I closed my eyes from the terror of it all, and opened them again to see myself as normal. Only now my eyes were marbles, my nose a carrot, and my mouth a piece of red licorice. I tried to scream and found I couldn't. I woke up covered in cold sweat, or so I thought. Stepping out of the bed, I found a puddle of ice-cold water on the ground beside where I slept. I couldn't make any sense of it. Maybe I had been sleepwalking and poured water on the floor? That was the only rational explanation I could suggest. I went out of the bedroom and got towels to mop up the water from the linen cabinet. Christine had already left for work, I realized. She'd been working extra hours leading up to Christmas, but it was earlier than usual for her to go in for her shift. After cleaning up the water, I went into the kitchen and made a coffee, then looked outside as I took a sip. I spit it out in surprise. The snowman was gone. Just gone. Almost like he had walked away during the night. Any tracks had been covered by freshly fallen snow. My first thought was Mr. Verdun. He was behind this somehow. It wasn't kids playing pranks, it was him. The dream occurred to me once again, and that voice in my mind spoke up.
The snowman isn't missing. You're the snowman now. Don't you feel it? The ice in your veins.
As I looked at the spot where the snowman should have been, I noticed something. Mr. Verdun across the way, staring out of his window at me. A steaming mug of something was in his hand, and he was staring at me intently. Then I saw my wife's car was still in the driveway. Christine? Are you here? I called out, knowing that she wouldn't be. Christine! And then I felt it, resting atop my head. The black felt fedora. As if it had been there all along, but it was such a part of me I hadn't paid attention to it. The thing suddenly felt like it was an extension of my body. Another limb like an arm, but on top of my head. The revulsion I had felt before at the feel of it glared up again 1,000 times worse at that thought, and I reached up to pull it off of me. It wouldn't come off. I ran to the bathroom to look in the mirror and saw what looked like veins growing down the side of my pale face from the fedora. No. Not veins. Branches. Roots. They dove down into my skin at places and blood seeped out from those spots, dripping black and running down my neck, ice cold. Screaming, I tried to rip it off my head but found it wouldn't come off. Pulling on it hurt worse than anything I'd ever felt before. White lights shooting before my eyes each time I tried, getting more painful with each attempt. In my mind's eye, I saw it again. The dream I had the night before. Looking at my own face in the reflection of ice. My eyes were glass marbles staring back at me. I breathed out and my breath plumed into the air as if I was outside on a February day, despite the heat of the furnace. It's going to be a very cold winter, and I am not looking forward to the spring. Thanks everybody for listening to tonight's story. You may have noticed there was a guest star in tonight's episode, and that was Baron Landred. There's actually 2 guest stars. The other is Lacie D or Lacie Dawn. So please check out Baron Landred's channel for more creepypasta stories. He's a very talented narrator, and there's also a video on his channel that I was featured in recently titled, I'll Never Decorate for the Dumonts Again. So you can find that on his channel, and there'll be a link in the description if you want to check him out. Thanks everybody for listening. Today's video was supported by patrons like Mark from Earth, Crimson Muse, Joy Burton, Diane Showers, Mark's Wall, Cheryl James, Pick Your Sticker, Teddy Dog, Clue 404, Mamakato, Dante Kincaid, Zarin Ray, Angela Donovan, Larian50, Devin Kyle, Timothy Baird, Ajeti, Bert Turner, Bajani Aspinall, Michael Pierce, Big Joe, Carrie Harkonnen, LaDonna Spivey, Scott Tanaka, Tom Stewart, Sherman Davis, Bryce Shelton, Susan McClendon, Elise Batiste, Lisa and the Cult Jam, Open Circuit, Fabulavore, Raymond Jaggers, That Darn Fox, Raison Detra, Kai Gaming 99, Wendy Burns, The Wendigo, Michael Squishy Park, The Gemstar, Vault 77 Citizen, Poppy Dan, Clovis Wolf, Elder Jelm, Derek Prey, Elder Being, KC Hawaii, Rob T, Tragic Mermaid, Darren Fishnaller, Cloves Anoya Harris, Roe Underwood, Florida Man Luke, Bethany's Mom, Winter's Kiss, Sam Brook, The White Stag, Corgi Connection, and No Name. If you'd like to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/Jordan Group Horror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content, as well as a Discord channel. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward, and if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you, which will be featured in the next Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. That really does help out a lot. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.